Hey guys, Budcat7 here. Okay, it is Thursday, May 13th, 2021, and I'd like to thank you for visiting the Stonewall Research channel here on YouTube. I really do appreciate it. All right, guys, well, in this video, I thought we might return and look at the ancient copper industry in North America because I think it figures so heavily into the story of the past that we don't know anything about, and how the peoples here in America, whoever they may have been, it seems to be these large hominids and, people of normal size too, if you want to consider the Adena and the Hopewell, who were engaged in this sort of high level technology, metallurgy, in the area of copper, um, not just simply annealing the copper, which is a way of forming it by hammering it. And this was the way that was most commonly thought for a long, long time until they found evidence of casting. And I did a video on this channel not only about the 500 million pounds of copper that was mined out of the Michigan Peninsula and the oxide ingots found there in Michigan by university academics there, I think at the University of Michigan. And, oxide ingots are, typically thought of as just coming from the Mediterranean area. So, that's a sort of enigmatic thing there. And I also went over a scholarly article about the casting of copper um, arrowheads and spearheads and other tools and weapons by some of these ancient Americans. So we know of some of these things through, past videos. When I reviewed the book, for instance, The First American, about the Hohokam people, and, The First American by C.W. Saran was a book. I mean, the reason why he wrote this book is because he felt that American archaeology and anthropology was being suppressed. He thought it was, being too restrictive as to what they were letting the public know about certain things. And he wanted to bring some of these things. He didn't like that all too much. And he was interested in archaeology. He worked for the Ministry of Propaganda for the Nazis, so he knew a BS story when he saw one. And he made it his mission to reveal some of these things that would otherwise, and still even today, are suppressed um, by some of these archaeologists, anthropologists in the Americas that found out some very different things. Well, it seems to be that the trend is in archaeology today in the Americas getting a totally different picture of the past when they keep on finding these habitation sites that are getting older and older and older, 10,000, 12,000, much earlier than they think or thought of. And now that the Smithsonian has changed its story because, apparently these peoples did not cross across the Bering Land Bridge. They came by boat, etc. But we also have, what we know from Michael Cremo's Forbidden Archaeology. Um, the lady there who, found or dated the site there in Mexico, Huiatlaco there. Um, we had mentioned this on in the interview with Jared Murphy and Mike from Conflict Radio about Michelle Steen McIntyre, who dated this stuff in something like 220,000 years. So the point of all of this is that where did I continually say there's no reason to believe that culture did not disseminated from the Americas out to the rest of the world and not the other way around. And it's all about this new world bias that I mentioned, again and again on my channel, because there's just so many evidences of things occurring so much earlier than in Europe and elsewhere in the world. And why would that be? These are sort of things that people would have to have studied long and hard about. Like, for instance, when C.W. Saran was talking about the Hohokam, the vanished people, you know, from the past there in Arizona, and how they built this system of canals without the use of, surveyor scopes and transits and everything. It just seemed impossible without a whole team of surveyors out there. And how they found how to do etching on shells by making a crude acid, and discovering how to etch things 500 years before, Hans Albrecht there in, Dutch guy, Dutch painter there, found out how to do etching 500 years later, and now what this article insinuates here in Ancient Origins by Jason Jarrell and Sarah Farah, who are great contributors here to Ancient Origins. They've written several books on the giants in the Americas, specifically the Adena. Okay, and it seems to be some level of copper and metallurgy technology existing at the time of the Hopewell and Adena. It was often attributed to the Hopewell, but we know from the research from the academics, for archaeologists and anthropologists from the University of Indiana, that they believe now that the Hopewell and Adena were contemporaries living in the same culture, but two different caste levels. A ruling caste and subjects, which would be the Hopewell. But you can see in some of these sort of artifacts here, for example, all right, like how amazingly symmetrical, and these things when they were brand new, how extremely well crafted they were. These are not primitive things here. These are extremely well crafted. You can't gauge that by some of these things have been corroded over the years, but some of these things are just amazing. Is a double-headed axe, and here's some artwork what they attribute to the Hopewell, but the Hopewell is, also the Adena. People sharing the same culture, the same art, etc., etc. So here's some of the craftsmanship and handiwork of the Hopewell, they say. It's really the Adena and Hopewell culture. And here's something I didn't mention in my video about the stone walls, but here's some of the Adena tablets, which you can see this rather odd artwork here, which has, some sort of symmetry to it. But in some cases, what are these things actually saying? And they often found these hieroglyphs with these buried with these Adena, and talked about again and again in our accounts of the giants in North America, with these hieroglyphs being found over and over again. What did they say? What did they mean? This is not exactly symmetrical. What is this saying on here? It probably is saying something, and it's similar to that in the stone walls. If you're not the progenitor of this sort of language, written art language or whatever, nobody else knows it. You teach it to people, but it's all forgotten and never bothered with again. But you have the level of these things, the level of craftsmanship and artwork in these things seem rather high. And again, some of these copper artifacts, some of these adzes and other tools and things that must have been amazing when they were new, you know, things like this. And, again, these weapons such as spearheads, etc., very high craftsmanship and high symmetry in there, well crafted things. How far did this sort of technology go back? Well, they're finding it older and older and older. And, it seems to also predate sort of metallurgy, early metallurgy in Europe. So, again, more evidence that it's not the new world, it's the much older world, and that, these technologies spread out from here, especially when you talk about the relationship between the Adena, you know, and the Bell Beaker people who seem so similar in stature, although the Adena are bigger, slightly bigger here in the Americas. And the Bell Beaker people are known as being Bronze Age, bringing metallurgy into these areas of Europe. And metallurgy in itself is an enigma because if you throw some rocks in a fire, a wood burning fire, it does nothing happens. You have to get these extreme temperatures to melt metal. It's not sort of an easy thing to just stumble upon. Who brought it about? But apparently these people in America just had it long before anybody else, it seems. So let's read this article by Jason Jarrell and Sarah Farmer. These, really so excellent authors written about the Giants, have their own published books and other things about North America that just seem enigmatic. A Medal of Power and Prestige, the ancient copper industry of North America. There are several criteria archaeologists look for in a quest to determine the level of cultural advancements of ancient peoples. Obviously, one of these criteria is technological advancement, considered by some to truly get underway with the introduction of metallurgy, which is enigmatic. Where does it come from? It's just not easy to stumble across. For some time, it was believed that the people who exploited the massive copper supplies from the North American Great Lakes region were members of a single cultural entity, once referred to as the Old Copper Culture. A far more interesting picture has emerged in recent decades as archaeologists have gradually realized that the Great Lakes copper was at the center of an industry for thousands of years, utilized by many different cultures. Furthermore, various dating techniques are constantly pushing the fabrication of advanced copper tools further back into America's ancient past. And again, we found out from the accounts of the Americas, these people were not running around in deer skins and animal skins and buffalo hides after all. At least these people from these periods we're talking about, much further back than what we consider, contemporary Native American peoples or native peoples of the Americas. It's just, they're talking about two different cultures, or a culture that came later on. We're talking about much earlier, and it seems the further back you go in time, the more advanced they have in many different ways. Like, for example, we found in Americas, these people were not running around in deer skins, they were running around in fabrics. Where'd they get fabric from? It's not so easy to produce fabric. You need all kinds of machinery, etc. Where'd they get it from? And nobody's talked about it. And how could they possibly have that? And they continually found these things also in bark woven tunics, etc., etc. With all the abundance of game and everything, they're buried in bark tunics and whatnot. Look, again, idea of what these people were eating in the past with their perfect teeth and everything. Maybe not what is commonly thought about. And their diets were quite different. But again, just more evidence here to support the fact that these people were far more advanced than we can imagine. And so they show this diorama of the people, running around in mines with like no clothes on and stuff like that. Well, that's not what was happening, people. Okay, this thing is just pure fantasy right here. They had cloth. We heard about it in the accounts. Not running around naked like this, especially up north there and whatnot. It's all ridiculous. whole story is, as we found out from Charles C. Mann, who sort of exposed that whole idea in his book there, 1491, when he read his kid's textbook, and his kid's textbook, was like, in his opinion, like ridiculous. So, in any case, let's read on here. Advanced copper tools. Accelerated mass spectrometry, AMS, allows for the dating of copper artifacts by showing the age of textiles or wooden fragments adhering to and partially preserved by the artifacts. This method has recently dated 2 copper conical points from Vilas County, Wisconsin, to 5,740 plus or minus 40 BC and 5355 plus or minus 60 BC. So way back in time, copper points featuring toothed or notched bases for hafting attachments have been found in Wisconsin and elsewhere, usually termed sawtooth, quote unquote, or serrate tang, quote unquote, points, and can be seen in photographs from numerous collections. Recently, one such point featured 4 teeth on one side and 3 on the other, was found at the Sandy Lake Dam site in Aiken County, Minnesota, with 8 other copper tools and 24 pieces of scrap metal. Bone was used to date the context of this finding between 5,000 and 4,000 BC. Way back when in the Americas, you got, metalworking of this degree. And as we found out through my videos here, in casting as well, casting metals from molten copper and making alloys such as brass. These people had all that technology. And C.W. Saram told us about an author that told us about how they had iron technology here in the Americas. They had iron metallurgy going on. What were they smelting in Galena Canyon? Another reason why maybe the native peoples in the areas feared these people, because they had a certain level of technology that they were afraid of. Here's copper knife, spear points, awls, and spade from late Archaic period, Wisconsin, 3000 BC, long before what we consider to be Native Americans or their ancestors. But who were these ancestors? The Adena and the Hopewell, 2 different peoples with different morphologies and phenotypes. People with vaulted craniums, the biggest in the world. As we know from Jason Jarrell and Sarah Farmer, the authors of this article. The early manufacture of advanced copper tool sets North America apart from most of the ancient world. Throughout most of the Old World, the rise of copper metallurgy almost universally occurs in the same pattern, with ancient groups beginning to work the metal in order to fabricate ornaments. This is true for finds from the 8th to 7th millennium BC, including a copper pendant from Shenadar Cave in Iraq, copper beads from Kayoni Tepsi in Turkey, a rolled copper bead from Ali Kash in Iran, and artifacts from Tel Halula in Syria. In Asia, the earliest metal artifacts are pins, bracelets, beads, pendants, mirrors dating to 5,000, 4,000 BC. In Britain, the earliest metal objects were ornamental beads, as are the first copper objects from France, where they are found in collective burials dating to 3,500 to 3,000 BC in the Paris Basin and Vinly. Heavy copper beads are known from southern France and the west bank of the Rhone, and the earliest metal objects from the Languedoc consist of copper and lead beads of the 3rd millennium BC Pont-Bouis culture. Copper, function before fashion. The persistence of this pattern of ornamental metallic objects has led to the theory that metallurgy was universally born out of aesthetic desires, with weaponries and tools always arriving later in the cultural sequence. This persistent pattern, however, is broken in North America, where copper tools were contemporary with or earlier than the ornaments. Eventually, it may be proven that advanced metal tools were made in North America earlier than anywhere else on Earth. Okay, so this is just a preview, and I didn't want not to make this video too long, but I just want to talk about it because I've reviewed things like this on my channel before about how advanced this culture may have been, that we know about, and where this could have actually disseminated too. Because they're always saying about how the Bell Beaker people were responsible for bringing metallurgy into Europe, okay, in the Bronze Age. And I say that the Bell Beaker people and the Adena people, and it's all one culture across all of the northern hemisphere here, at least on either side of the Atlantic here, that we could know about with the Adena and the Beaker people, that they were all one people, one unified people, all across the northern hemisphere at a time where the ocean levels, they're talking about 7,000 years ago, 8,000 years ago, well, the water levels were much lower then, according to them. Okay, so land, especially the way they sail, with the coast in sight, etc. I mean, it seems to me that people have been traveling back and forth to the Americas for a very long time. And then people like Gail High Pine from Ayahuasca Magazine, a native person here in the Americas, seems to think that her peoples came from this soil, and that the introduction of Asian and Siberian DNA came much later on. Okay, in her mind, unfortunately, there's so many people who are such big advocates for Native Americans, they don't even know what Native Americans think about it. They're busy going along with whatever cockamamie story the Smithsonian's come up with, which they've been wrong so many times on. It's ridiculous already. I mean, how many times are you going to be wrong before somebody says, look, let's leave the whole question open for debate because you guys can't figure this stuff out, you know? And they haven't, they just haven't. And the whole idea that cavemen crossed to the Americas by boat, well, anybody in the past then could get to the Americas by boat, and anybody, and they did. And it's just what all these evidence of these people being here in the Americas, again, with garrisoning places for trade purposes. This is what the past is all about, folks. It's just over and over and over again. How many times you got to hear it, But people want to make all kinds of great stories out of it. It's like some golden age Hollywood spectacles or whatever, just leave out all the mundane stuff and make, focus on all the sensational stuff, which may be important to some degree, but you have to think about all these things on sort of general relative terms. Who is bringing what technology with them, and how far back does it go, and where do these people get it from? It just doesn't come out of nowhere. Again, just metallurgy doesn't come out of anywhere. Who figured it out? But somebody was making stuff. You have that column in India there that never oxidizes, iron column. How'd they do that? It's just more evidence of a far different civilization in the past with technologies we don't know anything about, and that some people may have carried on into the future, especially these, odd looking humanoid type beings, whether they be the Adena or the people from Galena Canyon, which had different kind of phenotype, which are sort of these elongated skull types. There's no reason not to believe that the elongated skull humanoids also engaged in hybridization with, Homo sapiens or human beings. You have to think about it that way. Or even hybrids of the elongated skull people with giants, and giants with regular people, and a three-way DNA being shared there. It seems to be that this DNA got shared back and forth among all these ancient humanoid species of peoples. And does anybody really wonder about that at all? It just seems like that's what's going to go on, man, because that's how people are. These are all the copper artifacts that have been found. Just amazing stuff. Some guy riding an elephant there, you know, India coins, ancient Indian coins. Well, there's some 500 million pounds of copper missing from the Michigan mines, and certainly haven't recovered that by way of artifacts. I have a feeling a lot of them were melted down into bullets and et cetera, by a lot of the American settlers and colonists when they came across them. Instead of being preserved. So I just found it interesting that somebody like Jason Jarrell would say that eventually it may be proven that advanced metal tools were made in North America earlier than anywhere else on Earth. Well, that may be true. And it seems to be that this Michigan copper got around quite a bit because I had seen other photographs of the oxide ingots and the molds for the oxide ingots in the Tennessee River Valley before the Tennessee River Valley was flooded there for hydroelectric power. I saw photographs of these, molds in the ground there for these oxide ingots that are traditionally thought to be only Sumerian in origin, so, or at least from that area of the Middle East there. So, just a short little article here, guys. Just to consider some of these dates given going back so many thousands, 5,000 years BC. Just seems that more supporting evidence for the New World not really being the New World, but perhaps being a much older world and going further back in the past, more advanced civilizations being in the Americas, since what has been found in the Americas is just so incredible in the ways of agriculture, for example, engineering with the canals, pyramids, other buildings, such as what they say, the Rio Bec style Mayan temples, etc., which are from a far older culture that was far more precise in their methods of stone cutting, etc. So there's so many elements of this story that are just missing from the past that we're only finding out now because the Americas has been ignored for so long and they've gotten it wrong for so long. Mainstream archaeology and archaeologists in the Smithsonian has gotten it wrong for so long that, why should we believe them on anything that they're going to put out? Just they don't know anything. They really do. They don't have really a real good picture of the past at all. They're still dealing with the inherent biases put in there by people like Alice Herdliska and Holmes there, who ran a Bureau of Ethnology and were, you know, Herdliska was just out of his mind, crazy. If you still look at pictures of him, you can see in his eyes and his face, he looks like a madman. He really does. So, I don't know, guys. Just consider that, some of the things that you can be found in the Americas as far as, technologies are concerned, such as metallurgy, etching, for example, things that were not found out about for hundreds and hundreds of years in Europe were done here, earlier in the Americas by these people that seem to be these other people from the past and not necessarily what we would think of as being Native Americans, these other people with very strange morphologies and phenotypes, like the people at Galena Canyon, for example, that nobody knows about because they buried that whole story. That's what C.W. Saran was trying to tell us about. They buried this story that's a link to the past that opens it up to, reconsideration. And that's something that mainstream is very hesitant to do, even in the face of good evidence, you know, such as that. down there with what Michael Cremo revealed to us about Virginia Steen McIntyre in his film Forbidden Archaeology. So, human beings being in the America, or humanoids being in America in a far, far distant past, comparable to anywhere else on Earth. Well, why should it be one way and not the other? It's not the New World. Maybe it's much older than we think and more technologically advanced, it seems, in many ways, just by examining everything, like those airstrips on the plains there in South America, just on the mountaintops. It looked like airstrips. So many of them there. Just what was going on down there in the past. Anyway, guys, I thought this was just an interesting article on just the whole copper industry in North America. Is something to be considered, and who is coming here from all around the planet to get this copper? Well, probably everybody, since it's so abundant and so pure a copper. One of the places in the world where copper is most pure. So, anyway, guys, if you like the video, please hit the like button and please do subscribe to this channel. We talk about many things that you might be interested in, different ideas than you've ever heard about anywhere. Okay, guys, anyway, Bloodcat7 signing out. Peace.